We are a part of the Mental Health News Radio Network.
You've tuned in to Rescue the Rescuer, the show that focuses on helping first responders who may be experiencing challenges such as addiction, PTSD, relationship failure, and more. We use stories of struggle and recovery to highlight successful survival strategies for those in this powerfully stressful field of work. And now, here's your host, Steven Kavalkovich.
Hey everyone, this is Steven. Thanks for joining me on the show. I'm a former paramedic in long-term recovery from addiction and post-traumatic stress disorder. I've created this podcast to help others who may be experiencing a story similar to mine find a path beyond their problems and towards a life that they deserve. Before we get started with today's episode, let's hear this short message from one of my supporters. Putting together this show has been amazing, but I couldn't have done it without the help of my producer. James Healy and the wonderful team over at McLean Media has been instrumental in helping me get the show off the ground and my message of healing to you. If you are like me and want to start your own podcast or write a book, but have no idea where to begin and are completely overwhelmed, you are in good hands. Give James a call today or set up a free discovery session and learn how you can quickly and easily get your powerful and important message out to those who need it. Head on over to recoveryinnovators.com for all the details. All right, thanks again for joining me, and let's get started with today's show. Hey, everybody out there. It is an absolute pleasure this morning to have my guest on the show. He's got a real world of experience from the fire service end, but also from the mental health arena, as he spent a good deal of his career in both aspects, and we're going to talk about that. So I've got Dan DeGryse on the line today. He is, first of all, he's a battalion chief with the Chicago Fire Department. And he's also worked in the mental health world since 1986 or so. He's got his bachelor's degree in psychology. He's also a certified addictions counselor and EAP counselor as well. So I'm going to let him talk. So Dan, welcome.
Morning or afternoon, Steve. Thanks for having me on the show. My pleasure.
Yeah, I appreciate you taking the time. I know you're a real busy guy, but I really I'm glad we got to be connected because finding you, and as you know, with the purpose of this show is, it's not I think we kind of had this conversation when we first talked a few weeks ago. It's not sexy. It's not fire hoses, it's not Halligan bars, it's not fancy extrication equipment. This is stuff that generally is kind of ignored and not really talked about. But I think you've recognized in your full career that the mental health awareness and addressing the mental health aspect of first responders, firefighters, and everybody is so important. And I'm sure you would agree with that, I imagine.
Yeah, no, we talked about it, and you're absolutely right. I almost equate it to RIT. I mean, RIT back, 25 years ago was not sexy. It was kind of frowned upon to put a company out in front of a building and solely have their task to, as a safety of our own men. They're like, hey, what are you going to do? You're going to take a whole company and just leave them out there in front? Well, wait a second. What's the biggest asset and most important asset on our job? And that should be us. And I don't want to offend too many people, but I think overall, the greater majority of us in the fire service kind of overlooked that. We've all learned year in and year out, anytime any of us have taken an exam, you got to say safety 3 times in your oral, otherwise you'll flunk or you'll not do well. Well, what does that mean? And what does that mean to you? And really it starts with ourselves. So mental health, behavioral health, substance abuse, suicide is not a sexy topic. You're absolutely right. So when people like you and I, as you said, connect somehow, some way, I'm more than happy to discuss the topic.
Yeah, I mean, and you also, I know that you also are a program director with it. Now, I think I'm saying it's right. It's Rosecrance, correct?
Correct, Rosecrance Florian Program.
Okay, and that's, I mean, I think you had told me, but kind of give a little bit of background of what that is.
So Rosecrance has been around for 101 years. And I could tell you there's not a whole lot of programs out there that started back in 1906, or 1916, I should say. They started as an orphanage and started with a family, and it was all about helping kids for the future. And then they started doing adult treatment, inpatient treatment back in 95. I've had a relationship with them because, as you can imagine, I was the EAP coordinator for the Chicago Firefighters Union for 14 years. And with 8,000 active and retired members, we've had a few issues.
Sure, of course.
One of the biggest issues of recent times had been suicide, which I didn't really have a lot of education in. I had a lot of education in psychology and in substance abuse, behavioral disorders, counseling. Suicide, I really don't know anything about until we had 11 suicides in 2.5 years of active and retired members. And that's just what we know of. So I actually reached out, and I was troubled. I was entrusted and the guy for the Chicago Firefighters Union. We had 11 of our guys take their lives. So I struggled a bit, and I did a lot of research. And then I ended up talking to the CEO, Phil Eaton of Rosecrance, and I said, I think we got to do something more. So we had a discussion, and hence the idea of the Rosecrance Florian the Rosecrance Florian Program came up. And really, there's a couple of unique aspects of it, because in the world of PTSD, depression, anxiety, bipolar, substance abuse, people will talk about evidence-based treatment or treatment modalities, individualized treatment programs. We got the best. We got this, and no one's going to say they don't have a good program. But having referred many people, I always thought that there was something missing. One of the big issues, obviously, is when you send a firefighter or EMS personnel to a counselor or to a treatment center, either inpatient or outpatient, the goal is to get them back to work.
Right.
And what that means is re-traumatization. So how do we prevent somebody from relapsing? How do we engage somebody first? So one of the things in regards to joiners, Tom Joyner is a psychologist out of Florida State, and he talks about a sense of belongingness, and a burdensomeness, and the ability to use lethal means. That all ties in with the fire service, I think, because some of us get hurt, some of us get alienated, and some of us see death on a regular basis, and that affects us mentally and emotionally. So what I've learned is we have a tendency to isolate ourselves, both in our mind and our body, and we needed to create a program, infuse into a program where men and women could connect again. And you mentioned, how did we connect? Well, I believe in energy in the world, and somebody wanted us to connect and talk about this.
Sure, absolutely.
So clinicians, while they're great, if they don't have me and you and people like us when they're in their most difficult time and struggling, what do you think they're going to listen to? You just kind of mentioned in regards to our discussion, it was going to be around a half hour, because that's kind of all people can manage at any one time. I'm not that riveting where somebody's going to go, I'm going to listen to him for 2 hours.
Yeah, me neither.
Despite what my ego might say. But when people come into treatment, so we have myself, who's been in the field for a while. I've had my own struggles. I have had my own family issues. We used a chaplain that has both education in the field of firefighting and EMS because he grew up in a family of firefighters and also as a clinician and spiritual. We have staff on the unit that all come from either fire, police, military background. We have a curriculum that addresses trauma. We have a curriculum that addresses relapse. We have a curriculum that addresses leisure management, which is one of the biggest things that I've seen over the last 3.5 years is we forgot to have how to have fun. We become nihilistic and we become kind of stuck in our own mind, and we need social support. So while some people, it's really kind of like AA for somebody that's in has an alcohol issue. It's somebody that has been there, that has experienced similar events, not the exact same, but similar events, and knows. And if I was trying to get help, I wouldn't have to explain to you, hey, it gets hot in the fire, or I can't go to the washroom when I want to, or hey, when there's something going on at home, I got to go to work. I can't just not go to work. Or when there's an incident I can't pick and choose the incidences that I go to.
Right. Yeah.
So all that stuff is really that connectiveness that we try to solidify again. And then we get into what's going on physiologically, what's going on spiritually, what's going on mental health wise, because we know from our EMS side, if we don't do a proper primary and secondary and continuous size up, we're going to miss something. So we have to do a battery of mental health tests to see, hey, what else might be going on? So that's just kind of a part of what we do. And there's so much more to what the Florian program is all about.
Well, you said something that kind of made me jump back a little bit in my head about, when you go for your, whether it be your fire test or your, to be a firefighter, or to be an EMT or whatever, it's always that focus in the classroom of, you have to say safety, scene safety, body substance isolation, or you fail the test automatically. And so it's like drilled in our heads, but there is no, they talk about scene safety. So, from obvious threats of, people with guns or chemical spill or something like that. But it's never mentioned mental health safety, fitness for duty. It's never taught. It's not part of the curriculum at all.
Right. One of the things I think, and if you go to FDIC or FRI or any conferences out there, they talk about leadership, and I'm a huge proponent of roll call. Not about telling people what to do, but really kind of gauging where everybody's at. I'm standing in front of 5, 10. I have houses that have 17. I have one house that has 22 people and 6 rigs. So how do you gauge in that morning, as some of the orders say, really, it does say, check the fitness for duty. Well, what does that mean? Good morning, how you doing? Is that how we're checking them? Are we having them doing push-ups? Are we having them doing deep knee bends? But what I try to do is have a discussion with the guys and girls and ask them really how they're doing. And if I don't get a response, I don't get mad at them and say, well, again, I asked you a question, but I'll start a drill. I'll try to see who's engaged and who's not. I'll scan the area just like we're supposed to do at a fire scene. And I'll really do that size up with my personnel each and every morning. So some people want to get in and out, and I don't think that's a good way to do it, because as I tell new officers, if you have a company of 2, 3, 4 men, or you're a captain and you have 8 men, or if you're a chief and you have 20 or 50, or, and we could go on from there. If you don't know where everybody's at, then that's a recipe for disaster. So that, in my opinion, is what safety is all about.
Wow. It's, to me, I don't know, maybe looking back now that I'm out of the first responder services, it's something that I know that if I was, under your leadership at that, in my career, it's something that would have been extremely invaluable to me, because I've shared this on my show about, I struggled in silence. A lot of people knew what was going on, and that was the crazy thing. A lot of people knew that I was struggling. I'd come in smelling like marijuana. I'd stink like weed, or my eyes would be bloodshot, or whatever. And it was only until after I hit the brick wall and I lost my career that people came to me and said, we saw what was going on with you. And it saddened me for the reason that, it didn't anger me like, well, why didn't you help me? It was more, wow, like you didn't even feel safe enough to address it. Like you didn't
Right.
even know what to do.
Yep. No, and you look at the fire scene, and we as individuals, we don't want to be told what to do. We want to learn quickly and take the initiative. So what is the deal in regards to behavioral health? Is it crossing the line? But really, honestly, I believe it's leadership. It's the fact that it has not been modeled. And we know from psychology, in a sense, it's about rearing. If you're an abused child, if you're in an abusive relationship, the likelihood of you abusing somebody else mentally, physically, emotionally, sexually is greater than somebody that has not and been in a nurtured environment. So I don't want to get too psychology on you, but it's really comes down, and we talk about leadership. And I don't teach any leadership classes. I don't know how people would respond to it. People want to see the big tough guys from the squads and the rescue trucks and beat their chest and eat their food with dirty hands. And I get that. But what is leadership? So like with psychology, they had the DSM-5, the Diagnostical and Statistical Manual on Mental Health Issues. They have 500 doctors that review these for years and come out with a new edition. Well, guess what? There's 5 editions. Why? Because they continue to learn. But how much have we learned in the fire service on how to manage, address, identify, and then where I'm at, and we could talk about it later, is education. And we have done some through Rosecrance. I asked them, it's not just about treatment. I don't want to get people at their worst. I want to get people at the beginning so that we can educate them on signs and symptoms. That's what we're supposed to do with size up and fire scenes, so we don't get ourselves caught in a bad situation. So why should it be any different with men and women? So we created trainings, and we have a national symposium that we did last year. We had 175 people from 23 different states, including Canada, that came. This year we include police and corrections, 911, family, clinicians, to, again, go back to what you said, connect people so that we can leave the plate truly better than what we found.
Well, it sounds like also what you're talking about. You said you don't want it to just focus on treatment, because by the time they need treatment, they're in a danger. They're already in the danger zone.
Correct.
This is about preventive maintenance. Like, do you want the fire truck to be broken down because nobody changed the oil, or do you want to work on the preventive maintenance end of it and start being proactive instead of reactive?
And with that too, Steve, is that without a doubt, and I'll say this as I would say it to me, is that you're not the same person that entered the fire service, nor am I. No one can be. So what does that mean? What does that look like? Does that mean that you have, or I have, or somebody else has PTSD, or does that mean I have post-traumatic stress, or does that mean I just am stressed? Does that mean I have a physiological issue? Does that mean that I have had lack of sleep, so now I have sleep apnea and I can't regenerate and recover? And my big thing now is that for us to go, I've talked to doctors throughout my entire life, and I've asked them about what we're doing in the first responder world, police, fire, military, and they're like, you know what? Your brain, your body, your autonomic nervous system is not created to manage the amount of stress that you guys experience in certain parts of the country. It's going to potentially fail, like computers, like cars, like windows, you name it. So, all right, let's accept that. But here's the issue. What's the recovery time?
You said that a few weeks ago when we talked, and yeah, go into that a little bit, because that's an interesting fact that I didn't even really think about.
So all these doctors come together and say, well, if you have this symptomology for 30 days, then this is your issue. This is your diagnosis. And while you kind of have to put a name to something, but what does that mean? Does that mean, like, so for example, you have a torn meniscus. If you have 40% that's taken out, we generally know it's going to be about 2 months of, or maybe 3 months of recovery, 2, 3, 4, depending on your age and all the other circumstances. So we get that. We might get a little frustrated, but we get that. If we have a head injury and a concussion, depending on the severity of it, right? And there's ways to judge that. There's a recovery time. Everybody's is not the same, but everybody kind of puts us in the same box in the sense of, well, you have anxiety and you have depression and you have PTSD. Well, again, I'm not a doctor and I don't promote myself to be, but I think there's variations of that. And then there's a recovery time. So the problem is we don't know that recovery time. That's the problem. So then people think, well, I got PTSD, I got it for life. That's not the case. What is the case is that you may have some symptomology for the remainder of your life, whether it be very low or moderate, but you have to get it addressed. The definition of crazy, right? Doing the same thing, expecting a different result.
Sure. Yeah.
How many times have you, I, or many of our friends continue to work through a back injury, a shoulder injury, a cold, an infection, and that's what we're taught to do, push through. Hello. Our brain drives us. Our brain drives us. It is a organ that even doctors and scientists are still trying to understand. So as firemen, because we're the smartest people in the world, right?
Yeah, of course.
What makes us think that we're going to be better in 2 weeks, 4 months, whatever. And so if we can conceptualize that, hey, I'm in the recovery process, as opposed to a negativity stigma in a sense of I got PTSD, maybe we could move towards a better understanding of what we're exposed to, and not just us. I mean, we had somebody that worked for the railroad. I work downtown Chicago, and we have somebody that either jumps onto the tracks or jumps into the river or jumps off a building every month, and probably more. That's traumatic for the people that see that. People that are on the railroads, they've got to pick up the pieces and so forth. Who helps them? I talked to one person there, and I said, hey, after we had a incident, I said, what happens to you now? He goes, oh, I get to go talk to the counseling center, and they assess me, and I get some time off. And I said, what's that time? And he said, oh, anywhere between 3 and 12 months. I go, what? He goes, yeah, they give me 3 to 12 months off. And I looked at my buddy, Jim Pearl, who was a special ops chief in Chicago, who was standing right next to me while we stood there for 2.5 hours waiting for the police to come and look at the crime scene while this guy was kind of rolled up in a ball with his, you know the scene. I'm not going to describe it.
Sure.
And I go, hey, Jimmy, what do we do? He goes, you get your gear, put it on the rig, and go to the next run. Well,
yeah.
How crazy is that?
Wow, that's really interesting. I mean, here's a guy obviously dealing with a traumatic situation, and their program is to give them healing time and recovering time. And these guys aren't exposed to this stuff on a daily basis.
Correct. Yep. And that's exactly it, the healing process. Now, one of the issues is that, we joined the fire service to be around people. But because of the carnage, the exposure to all that stuff, what I've learned from myself and from other people is we have a tendency to withdraw both physically and mentally. As I say, and I've done this, unfortunately, with my own family, where even though I'm sitting in the same room, I'm not there.
You're not there. Yeah.
And I'm not going to go any further than that, but I think unfortunately, there's a greater percentage of the fire service, police, and military know what I'm talking about. The guys that come back from deployment and have been trained day in and day out to save their brother and save themselves. They come back from deployment, and guess what? What does society want them to do? They want them to stop being that guy, that soldier, and be who they were beforehand. Well, guess what? That's not how behavior management works. It's kind of asinine. So one of the biggest issues that I had was I would go to the firehouse, I'd come back, and I wouldn't transition very well. I wouldn't come home and be husband and father. I didn't know that while it was happening. I wasn't an alcoholic. I'm not an alcoholic. My dad is. I have a 4-time greater chance of becoming an alcoholic than does somebody that isn't born from an alcoholic family. But I didn't have the education on that. When I was coming home, I carried a little bit of baggage. And that poor transition affected my relationships with my spouse and with my kids. And it wasn't until some attention to that matter over a period of time that I recovered from that. And better. I always say, no, my wife likes me. That's cool.
Right. Yeah, I get it. I mean, and that's the thing too. Like, I think about it. You and I both know in the police force, in the police service, fire service, EMS. I mean, look at the divorce rate. It's gigantic. And it has been. It always has been.
Well, what I'll say is, and I don't actually know the stats in that, but I could tell you that for 14 years as the AP coordinator for the Chicago Firefighters Union, I kept statistics. One of the guys that sits on the International Labor AP Committee with me is Frank Lito, the Deputy Director of the FDNY Counseling Center. We compared notes on why people accessed our services. And not to put you on the spot, but what do you think the number one issue is with all the stuff from substance abuse to mental health to PTSD to marriage and so forth?
Oh, I think the number one reason for me, I would have to say it's got to be relationship failure.
Without a doubt. By far. Exceedingly far. And that all leads to, it's again, the chicken or the egg. What comes first? The
right.
Mental health thing or the relationship and blah, blah, blah. So by far, over 14 years, I did it, and Frank Lito did it, and it's not, PTSD was not even in the top 5.
Wow, it's interesting when you actually hear the stats on it, because people. I even look on social media, and there's like 100 groups for PTSD and firefighters, but there's nothing for relationship breakdown or divorce or whatever, something like that.
Well, and I'm going to say something that might not be popular. We all have PTSD or PTS in some way, shape, or form. I get in my car now and I get hypervigilant. I get anxious. I look around. The police, when they go into a restaurant, when they're on their day off, what do? They sit with their back towards the door or facing the door. Why do they do that? Situational awareness. Why do people that are in the military? I got a buddy of mine, Birdman. He's a Navy SEAL, was in SEAL Team 7, was deployed, I think, 4 or 5 times, was out in the military for 8 years, and he has that stare. Not like something's wrong with him, but he has that definitive stare. What is he doing? He's sizing everything up. How do you stop that? Yeah. Hey, guess what, Steve? So whatever your issue is, just stop
it. Yeah, good luck. That's just like when Nancy Reagan said, just say no.
Correct.
If that worked, we wouldn't be having these conversations.
Correct.
It goes so much deeper. And, I have to ask you, because, we got a little bit left of time, but I really want to ask you, because it's been on my mind, with you being, a battalion chief in one of the largest fire departments in the country. Do you feel that you're a minority amongst that 8 to 10, would you say there's 8,000 people in the department or so, or maybe more?
Active and retired. There's 5,000 active fire and EMS.
Okay, so 5,000. I mean, I imagine, I'm guessing here, that you probably feel like a minority when it comes to trying to change this culture. I know that might be a rough question to ask. I don't know.
Yeah, when you look at your home and you're struggling with stuff, anybody, you kind of wonder who your friends are, right? Mm-hmm. So when you ask that question, I wonder, if I could put together 100 people, maybe, what is that, 1% or 2%? That's not good. Now, again, I haven't talked to everybody, but when we have fundraisers for, cancer, and we have fundraisers for a line of duty deaths, and that, which are all very important things. Can you imagine having a fundraiser for PTSD or depression? Where would people come out? Would people come out of the woodwork and say, "Yeah, here, I want to help you with this"? Now, I'll tell you this. I don't know if there's any Fools listening. If you're familiar with the Fools organization, Fraternal Order of Leatherhead Society,
I am not, but okay.
They're a national organization, or international organization. The president of the Fools organization, or Fools International, is Rich Stack. He's a lieutenant. I reached out to the Southside Fools, and a friend of mine, Rich Dory, retired battalion chief, 37 years in the fire service, said, "Why don't you come out and talk to the guys?" And I'm like, I don't know how I'd be received. And I tell you what, I came in there, and there was a small group, and they all sat and paid attention, and they are 100% behind changing the thought process and the direction of the stigma that's been associated with mental health and behavioral health.
So, I mean, it's slowly getting better, just like change in any culture. I use this quote that I've heard it for I've heard it many times, and I use it a lot because I think it paints the picture. There was a philosopher in the early 1900s. I believe his name was Arthur Schopenhauer, and he said that all great ideas or social change ideas go through 3 stages. First, they're ridiculed. Next, they become drastically opposed, and eventually they serve as self-evident. And I think we're in between the opposition and the self-evident place, because we can't keep ignoring the elephant in the room.
Well, some people can, unfortunately. People like us are not, and that's why I'm more than happy to spend time with you and anybody else that wants to have a in-depth conversation. I have a philosopher that I talk to on a regular basis. His name is Bobby Halton.
Okay, yeah.
He's the editor-in-chief of Fire Engineering and the lead for FDIC. But he came out to our symposium last year, and he finished his presentation saying we're at the beginning of the beginning. So, not to debate what you just said, but I think, and when he said it, I'm like, and I kind of mulled it over, and I think in the fire service, yes, we are at the beginning of the beginning, and what will be the next stage to that?
So, I mean, I can't argue that, because it does make sense, because I don't know if I shared with you, but I've shared with some of the listeners on different podcasts I've been on, and this one, that I was actually surprised that when I put this show together and started sharing it in the social media channels, I got a lot of positive response. Actually, I found that I've been finding I get more positive response from service, fire service and first responder people all in other countries. But here I find to be a lot of pushback. I actually had a guy I used to work with. We used to work on the medic unit together. We actually, I mean, I'll share it. We used to smoke marijuana in the medic unit. I'm not proud of that, but that's what happened. He said to me last week, your stupid podcast isn't going to help anybody. Go stick a needle in your arm again. And I was like, what? I mean, are you kidding? Like that's what we're fighting against.
So let me respond to that, and all I'll do is tell people to think back to the firehouse and think of your kitchen, and then think about the old timer that was sitting in that chair that you didn't disrupt, the guy that played the crossword puzzle. They didn't have Sudoku back then; they do have now.
Yeah.
They played the crossword puzzle, smoked in the corner, drank their coffee, and when he got out of his seat, no one sat in that seat. That was what was modeled. And why was that guy sitting there? And I believe that when that guy came on the job, he came on to be a part of that kitchen table. But over time, they became a little bit isolative in their head, and there might have been some mental health stuff that went on because there wasn't any education on the changes that happen from the day we come on to the day we go off the job. And unfortunately, many of those guys struggled silently, just like they are now, which were repeating history. And I told my wife, probably about 5 years ago, I said, man, I have to do something. And I wasn't sure exactly what needed to be done. But I said, we can't keep on doing this, whatever we're doing, because it's not working. And that's when I reached out to the CEO, started the Florian program, and now do regional trainings. And I think that there's Bobby Halton, fire engineering, 5 to 10 years ago, 300 presenters, maybe 1, 2 that were on behavioral health. 2 years ago, there were 11. Last year, I don't know, there were a couple less. I know a couple guys I know, Frank Lito, and then another friend of mine, Pat Kenny, who lost his son to an intentional overdose. Neither one of them could make it. So I think they're around 8. And I don't know how many will be next year. But when we have these conferences, why don't we have more of that? Are we, and I'll say this nicely, are we big sissies to talk about that elephant in the room? Are we afraid of actually opening up that sore and saying, yeah, you know what? I'm not the guy. Because Steve, let's be honest, there's a lot of guys out there that are not the guy at home as they are at the firehouse.
Oh, of course. Yeah. Of course. I know it. I know it. And you know it. And, Dan, I'm so grateful that you and I got to connect because, hearing from you and, with your years and years of experience and being involved, how you are on both sides of the fence, as far as, directly in the trenches, still getting getting in a command unit and going to fires and emergencies, but also addressing the mental health emergencies that are very, very real. That's, to me, I like to get on the phone. I like to bring people on and talk to people that are trailblazers, that are willing to go against the grain, because we have, if we don't do it, I mean, who else is going to?
I said that to my wife 5 years ago. I looked at her and I go, who is that person? And I always have to keep a sense of humility, and I also have to chuckle a little bit, because now I say, if you look around the room and you don't see the old guy, guess what? You are the old guy.
Yeah, right. Well, I've accepted the fact that, for me, like my career as a first responder is over, and that's okay. But I know, and I share this a lot, that because I survived, heroin overdoses and career loss and divorce and jail, all the things I survived, it is my responsibility as someone who still holds that part of my life, that being a part of that brotherhood, I still hold that very close to my heart. And if I can help one person to stay in their career or to stay married and to not put a bullet in their mouth, then I'm gonna turn the microphone louder and louder and speak to everybody as much as possible to do that, even if it helps just one.
Yeah, well, the interesting thing, Steve, is that That one person probably has a significant other or a spouse. That one person has a brother, a sister, a mom, a dad, a child, a grandpa. So when you say one, that means more.
Right. Well, as well as I do, we drop the pebble in the pond and the ripple effect. We might not necessarily even see the results, but as long as we keep doing what we're doing, we could create. I mean, I like chaos theory. I like the idea of the butterfly flapping his wings on one side of the world can cause a tidal wave on the other. I like that because that's what we're doing. Real quick before we get off here, I want you to please take a minute, promote the event that you have coming up, because I want to make sure that the listeners hear it, and I'm going to sure as heck do everything I can to, once this episode is up, to share it with everybody so you guys can pack the place.
Yeah, try to take a look. Don't believe what I say. Look at what we have on paper, and you could go to the website at rosecranceflorian.org and look at the speakers that we have there that range from police officers to fire personnel to retirees to clinicians that are going to share about stress, the effect it has on us, how to overcome that, to understand mental health. And I don't say mental health in a negative way. I say we have physical health. We could say that without issue. So we should be able to say mental health without issue. And our organ, our brain is an organ. That's physical health. So how do we help preserve that? And we need to come together with clinicians and other first responders so that, as we did with our own homes, we lived in homes that were basic, and maybe the moms and dads just repainted and put carpet in there. Now we have a tendency to knock it down except one wall and rebuild it. Well, why don't we do that in a sense of the fire service? And what we need to do, what we're trying to do with the symposium, is bring people together, greater minds than me, and have a discussion on where we can go forward to address 2 million active and retired firefighters across the country so they can have a better quality of life. And I'm not saying removed from stress, not removed from mental health issues, because we know that on an annual basis, there's probably 60,000 injuries, 60,000 physical injuries. Well, how many internal injuries, mental health injuries are there on an annual basis? And why don't we have a venue to talk about that? What is our, what's that one show? What's your major malfunction pile?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know.
Full Metal Jacket.
Full Metal Jacket. Yeah.
So come on. So that I challenge everybody and invite everybody, both equally, to come to the symposium we have in Rosemont, Illinois, at the Crown Plaza, September 21st, 22nd. It's 2 full days. It's $275. You get CUs, not only for clinicians, but for EMTs, food's included. And we have people right now from about 17 different states and about 40 or 45 different departments and clinicians. So come learn.
Awesome. And you said something, you threw the Full Metal Jacket reference out there, and I love it. And you said, the major malfunction, one thing that I love to debunk is these sayings that people say, like, sticks and stones may break my bones, but names may never hurt me. And that's a lie. Sticks and stones will break your bones, but names can names and being, experiences can definitely hurt you worse, because bones heal. Sometimes those things sometimes those other things don't, especially if we're not even aware that they're there.
And there are how many, anywhere from 80 to 100 line of duty deaths, and all those 60,000 injuries. There's people that are around all those people, and then there's people around those people. and so on and so on and so on that are all affected. I'm not saying that they have a disorder. What I'm saying is that they have an injury, a memory that will never go away. And you have to have people to be able to discuss that. Otherwise, it'll fester and lead to something that is negative.
Absolutely.
So we can have venues just like this where if one person's listening that could share with somebody else, that's what the symposium's about. You're not broke. You're not bad. You've had adaptive behaviors that have become maladaptive. And we're trying to identify those, address them, and provide you with proper or appropriate adaptive behaviors.
Well, now, lastly, what are the dates of the symposium? I think it was September, 21st? 21st?
Yep, 21st and 22nd at the Crown Plaza. And if you go to, like I said, rosecranceflorian.org, you'll see all the speakers coming from all over the country.
All right. Well, I will make sure that we get that up in the show notes where everybody can find it and reserve a spot to be there. And it's been a pleasure having you on, Dan. I really appreciate you taking the time. Everybody, Dan DeGryse, Battalion Chief, mental health advocate. Thanks a lot, Dan.
Thanks, Steve.
Hey everyone, thanks again for listening. I really hope it'll help you or your loved one. If you get a chance, I really would appreciate it if you could head over to iTunes and Apple Podcasts and leave a review. It will really help me out in many ways. Take care everyone, and remember, you are not alone in your struggle.
I want to give a big shout out to one of our supporters, the Addictions Academy. The Addictions Academy is the world's foremost accredited trainer of addiction coaches, addiction counselors, interventionists, and international master addiction coaches, offering on-site training at your rehab or facility, live virtual classroom webinars, or on-demand classes covering an extensive availability of courses and certifications. Check them out at theaddictionsacademy.com or call Dr. Callie Estes and her team at 1-800-706-0318.
Thanks for listening to Rescue the Rescuer. For show notes and more, head on over to rescuetherescuer.com.
We are a part of the Mental Health News Radio Network.com. This show is produced by James Healy of RecoveryInnovators.com. If you have a message and want to start a show of your own, contact him and let him know that we sent you.